Another unstabilized approach with a failure to go around by a solo Cessna Citation pilot into Mayfield County Airport, Kentucky, leads to the following undesirable aircraft state. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the BLANCOLIRIO channel. Let's check it out. This channel is sponsored by viewers like you that support this channel here on Patreon. Thank you for your support. Starting first with the Aviation Safety Network, this happened on Thursday, the 18th of September. Cessna 525 Citation CJ4, owner-operator Stonecrest Capital LLC, November 577 Romeo Tango, a 2013 model Cessna Citation. Only one person on board, the solo pilot. The aircraft departed St. Louis Regional Airport, Illinois, and its destination was Mayfield Graves County Airport, Kentucky. The Cessna 525C Citation, November 577 Romeo Tango, sustained substantial damage when it overran runway 19, which is a 5,002-foot long runway by 100 feet wide, at Mayfield Graves County Airport, Mayfield, Kentucky. The sole pilot on board was not injured. The last ADS-B return was recorded at 1.64 miles north of runway 19. The aircraft was descending through 1,300 feet with a reported ground speed of 213 knots. Weather at the time of the accident was fine with light winds, 3 knots, and perfect visibility. Hot temperatures. Here's a picture of the aircraft before the accident and a picture of the aircraft after the accident, taking the airport perimeter fence with it all the way into the corner of this house located across the street from the end of the runway, 700 feet off of the end of the runway. Here's a look at that short flight, only 144 nautical miles from St. Louis down to Mayfield. Mayfield County Airport being a non-tower, uncontrolled airport with the 5,000-foot long runway located just to the east of town. Looking at the details for runway 19, it does look like there is a 3-degree glide path angle set of lights for that runway. Let's take a look at the airport and runway here on Google Maps. There's the 5,000-foot long runway. Here's the end of the runway, which he overran, and here's the houses located off the end of the runway. And if we jump down onto the street view, it looks like this was the house the pilot hit. Scoot over here a little bit. The Citation ended up in the corner of this house. Now, the date of this photo was September of 23, it says down here. If we go back to the aerial view, this imagery is dated 2025. And if we look down closer on this house on the 2025 photo, the trees are not there. And if we look at the street view again from 2023, it looks like there was a series of trees. My question was, did the Citation left wing go through a series of trees? It looks like these trees were not there at the time of the crash. Now, some real quick analysis on this. If we look at the end of the runway located right here, measure this distance, take it up to about here. 3 miles out would be just south of West Plains or Highway 483. At 3 miles out, you should be at 1,000 feet on your typical visual approach, 3 to 1. 3 miles out, you should be at 1,000 feet. For your standard stabilized approach, you need to be on speed and configured by 1,000 feet. So this aircraft should have been on speed and configured by this point right about here, just south of West Plains. Now, if we go and look at this ADS-B data for the flight, 483 is located right here. According to this preliminary ADS-B data, and all this altitude needs to be baro corrected, it is showing the pilot at 1,975 feet. Now, is that MSL? The airport elevation is about 500 feet. Yeah, 522 feet. 1,975 feet and 223 knots. Normal approach speed for the Cessna Citation is something on the order of about 100 knots. So nearly twice as high and twice as fast as he should be at the 1,000 foot point. Clearly an unstable approach. The last data point here shows him at 207 knots at 1,300 feet, less than 2 miles from the end of the runway. If we take a look at this data in Google Maps, here's the end of the runway. The runway's over here. Here's West Plains. Here's 3 miles out. In order to make this a stabilized approach, he should have cut this altitude nearly in half. It should be way down here for a normal stabilized 3-degree glide path, and on approach speed way out here at 1,000 feet, and certainly no later than 500 feet, or about half of that distance, 1.5 miles from the runway. If we take a quick look at the landing distance performance charts for the CJ-24 at an elevation of 1,000 feet, 35 degrees ambient temperature, pretty warm out. Near your max gross weight, you've got a 3,000 foot landing distance. Remember, the runway is 5,000 feet long. At your minimum weight, you're down to 2,200 feet. So no problem with the landing distance on this 5,000 foot runway in these conditions, dry. VREF varies from 113 knots down to 94 knots. So you needed that ref speed of 100 knots, certainly no later than 500 feet above the ground, 1.5 miles out, not 200 knots, nearly twice as fast. To give you a rough idea of the profile on some hand-sketched graph paper here, you want to be 3 miles out, 1,000 feet here on speed and on glide path fully configured. This aircraft at less than 2 miles out was way up here at 1,300 feet and 200 knots, way off the target. The majority of accidents in the Cessna Citation, like many aircraft, happen in the landing phase. Nearly 83% of these landing accidents are preventable with a timely go-around. But in actual flying operations, go-arounds happen only very rarely, only about 0.5% of each landing ever ends up in a go-around. And that's because generally 98% of the landings are stabilized approaches. It's just capturing those approaches that are unstabilized is the challenge. Because on unstabilized approaches, actual go-rounds from an unstable approach outside of the parameters, that only happens about 2 or 3% of the time. Rarely are we capturing a go-round during an unstabilized approach. And why is this? It gets into all kinds of pilot philosophical discussions and psychology. Is it a failure to go around? Is it a fear of screwing up the go-round? Go-rounds do end up in some sort of problem nearly 10% of the time. Because we so rarely ever do go-arounds and practice them, in the airlines, we only practice them usually in the simulator. It's so rare that we see them out on the line because the approaches are so stabilized that you can get into trouble during the go-around. So maybe pilots are reluctant to do the go-around procedure because of fear of, dicking it up. Now keep in mind these stats that I'm throwing out there are more for the Cessna Citation series of aircraft and these kind of commercial and Part 135 operations, not necessarily general aviation. So Citation pilots through the Citation Jet Pilots Association and some of the other high-performance aircraft are adopting airline standards for stabilized approaches. And this is pretty close to airline standards right here. At 1,000 feet, they call them gates here at the Citation Jet Pilots. At 1,000 feet, you have a standard call-out. This is another contributing factor to this accident, is this was a single pilot operation. This sort of crew coordination is much more effective if you have 2 pilots on board. I would argue, in my opinion, that it's always a much safer operation if you're operating these high-performance aircraft with 2 current and qualified pilots on board. So at 1,000 feet, you need to call out configured, and that means you're on speed, fully configured, and on glide path. But here in the citation world, they're giving you until 500 feet to get that stable, to get that worked out. If you are not stable, configured with all these parameters met, then you go around. There's some excellent videos here on the citationjetpilots.com webpage that explains all this that I just discussed. Let's check out a little clip of it with hopefully their permission.
The Citation Jet SOPs are pretty simple and adaptable to all kinds of aircraft. A verbal callout at 3 points during the approach. 1,000 feet above touchdown, confirm landing configuration and approach airspeed. If not configured and not able to correct before the next gate, go around.
Yeah, no, he's stable.
There's 1,000 feet, and we are now in the stabilized zone.
500 feet, on airspeed, on glide path. If not, and not able to correct before the 200-foot gate, go around. 200 feet. Approach airspeed -5 to +10 knots, bank less than 15 degrees, within PAPI guidance. If not, go around.
We are too high at 200 feet. Going around.
The entire time as you're coming in for the approach and for the landing, you're talking out loud, you're talking, am I within the limits? Am I within the gates to land this airplane safely on the ground?
And while these SOPs are specific for the Citation, the CJ pilot training materials will be available to anyone to adapt to their aircraft.
So the NTSB will have to painstakingly go through the systems on the aircraft and make sure that all the systems and braking systems, all those systems that help stop the aircraft, were working correctly. And hopefully they'll be able to get a readout on the exact touchdown point, the location of the touchdown point on the runway, and the speed of the aircraft at the point that it touched down. Maybe some local video, surveillance, camera video could help with that as well. Stabilized approaches prevent undesirable aircraft states like this. This applies in general aviation too. Even in backcountry operations, a stabilized approach may look a little bit different than what you're used to in the airlines. It's not necessarily a 1,000 feet and a 3-degree glide path, but it more likely involves a stabilized energy state of the aircraft as you approach your landing point on speed. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.